Hawaii, some of the most famous islands in the world, with some of the most incredible scenery in the world. But in this video, I will be attempting to survive 100 days on these islands through the intense heat, wildlife, and nature. Also, every 20 days, a massive storm will sweep through these islands, making it much harder for me to survive. Now with that being said, let's get started. Now before we get into the video, I want to mention that today I'm teaming up with the Maui Strong Fund. 1 month from today, I'll be donating 100% of this video's revenue to the Maui Strong Fund in order to help the people of Maui recover from the tragic wildfires that occurred this past August. I've also attached a fundraiser to the video, so by all means feel free to donate to it. Don't feel like you have to, but it's there if you want to. Now that being said, let's get started with day. I spawned in and took a look around me, only to see that I was on a hill right next to the shore. So I decided to start by getting some wood. I then made my way down to the beach, and saw that it was rather lively. What you up to? Anyways, I crafted a wooden pickaxe, and shortly after, collected some stone. I then crafted my stone tools, and decided on what my first goal should be. And that was simple: find iron and wool. The iron would give me shears, which I could then use to craft my leaf armor, which protects me from the heat. The wool I would simply use to craft a bed, and I definitely need a bed for hardcore Minecraft. But as I dug into the side of this mountain, I figured that I should probably explore the area a little first, as I could always mine at night. So I did just that. I climbed on top of these trees and took a look around me, but all I saw was more hill. Either way, I was starting to lose some hunger. So, I tree jumped my way down to the shore and targeted this octopus. I didn't want to get too close to it, but I also had to in order to hit it. Eventually, I just decided to go for this boar, which proved to be a very bad idea. That was closer than it should have been. That was close. That was really close. Okay. As the sun started to set on the big island, I retreated to my mine, where I then spent the night doing lots of mining. I ended up not only finding a lot of coal, but I also found 2 iron, which might not be a lot, but it's the perfect amount for shears. And so, I ended day 1 by cooking my iron and pork. The next morning, I took a look at the sunrise outside, before collecting all of my things and leaving my mine. And of course, this skeleton had something to say about that. But I soon got to work, as I crafted my shears and started making glass for glass bottles. After all, I have to watch out for both hunger and thirst. Oh, and temperature, which I soon solved by equipping my leaf armor. I also crafted the glass bottles, and after drinking some much needed water, I regained some health. I then crafted a boat, and decided that my best bet for finding wool would be to row along the shore, hoping that some kind of structure with wool would just pop into view. But as I rode along the rocky terrain of the big island, I saw no such structure. I instead spotted a vantage point that I thought would be useful. But upon walking further inland, I saw that there was also apparently no vantage point, as the foliage was dense. So that left me to go by treetop again. And that's when I noticed that the ground below me was changing texture. But soon enough, the sun started to set. And as I walked around in this new dry terrain, I burrowed into the ground like the little pixelated groundhog I am, and that night, I did some more mining. Not to brag or anything, but I ended up finding 7 iron. In all honesty, I don't know if that's good or not, but it was certainly enough for me to craft tools with. As the sun rose on the peaceful morning of day 3, I was having anything but a peaceful morning, as I walked into a creeper, and then an enderman. But in all fairness, they did point me in the direction of these mobs, 2 of which turned out to be sheep. I quickly sheared the first one and immediately got 3 wool. I was more cautious of the goat though, as it definitely looked like it wanted to attack me. Like, look at it, it just has that look on its face. Anyways, both sheep and goats are actually non-native species that were brought to Hawaii in the late 18th century, and we'll talk more on that later. But for now, I was out of hunger, so I crafted a bed, a shield, and cooked some food. I then figured that it would be best to get back to shore, so I can assess where on the big island I am. And so that was my goal for now, just to explore. And as I parkoured atop the trees, I ended up reaching the shore with much lower health than from before the parkouring. I wonder how that happened. Anyways, then I got my first jump scare. Yeah. No. What noise is that? I don't think I've ever made that noise before. Jump scares aside, as I followed the shore, I spotted some big cliffs. And I soon came to realize that these weren't just any cliffs. Waipi'o Valley is a massive scenic valley on the big island of Hawaii that not only looks monumental, but was home to a rather monumental historic figure for Hawaii, King Kamehameha I. But more on him later. See, Waipi'o means curved water in Hawaiian. This is possibly referring to the curved nature of the valley, or perhaps the many waterfalls that line it. Yet as I navigated my way through the valley, I had something on my mind. What would this even be? This is the northeastern point of the island? That's what I'm going to go with. Northeastern part of the island. But as the sun started to set, I found a spot to sleep at. Before I went to sleep though, I couldn't help but notice how amazing everything looked. Next morning, I left this scenic area before looking at the crafting recipe for a ship helm. You see, my plan for this video is to sail along all of the islands in my very own ship base. And in order to control this ship with a helm, it looked like I would need gold. So that was my new objective, find gold and craft my ship. I went out into the deeper waters to try to find a shipwreck, but had no such luck. However, hope was regained when I spotted this lighthouse. Only it was quite busy around the structure. And the structure itself was a pillager tower. Because of course it was. But I needed to regain some health before I even attempted that. And so, I ate some animal fat and drank some water. And then, I knew it was time. I decided to start on the second floor, for whatever reason. And this proved to be a bad idea. So, I climbed another floor up, and stole what loot I could from up here. I then tried giving a peek below, which was another bad idea. Yeah, I was really low here. So I climbed up to the top of the tower, and saw just how many sharks there were. So there are sharks. That is confirmed. And then I saw another amazing sunset. I woke on day 5 to some rain. But this definitely wasn't the storm that I'd be experiencing every 20 days. Either way, I decided to jump into the water and row away fast, from both the sharks and the pillagers. And after a bit of rowing, I had healed myself up. Okay, we're just gonna go on shore. Anyways, this gloomy weather led me to burrow yet again, but this time in search of the gold. However, as I mined all the rest of the day, I only ended up finding coal. Next morning, I had a tough decision to make. I knew that the Pillager Tower had a decent chance of carrying gold, but that meant backtracking a bit. I soon made up my mind and decided that it was worth it. And so I headed back over to the Pillager Tower, and upon doing so, I took a bit of a different strategy. And it absolutely paid off. The gold, raw as it may be, was just part of the great loot that I had found, and led me to craft the ship helm. I also caught this seagull right as it stole my food. And as I explored more that afternoon, I found myself in another dry and rocky area. This shouldn't come as a surprise though, as the Big Island is by far the most volcanic island. But as the sun set that night, I cooked my food. And on day 7, I headed back to the shore for some more rowing. And once again, the scenery was unreal. However, my attention was soon stolen by the sudden appearance of a house. I entered this house and, after stealing this lantern, found that it had some pretty decent loot, like this food and these sunglasses. They don't even go over my eyes. You know what? No, this is stylish. As I left the house though, I spotted another nearby. And upon entering it, I found a large collection of bananas. Alright, why would I want poisonous essence? It doesn't make sense, does it? It's not really... I then borrowed some bamboo for my ship, and collected some of these palm logs, before heading to sleep. I woke up next morning and decided that, while I wanted to get resources for my ship, I also wanted to do some exploring first. After all, I had time, as the first real storm wasn't due to arrive until day 21. And so, I did some more rowing. And after looking at the relentlessly amazing scenery, I came across this dark gash in the terrain. Now, I knew that this was the result of lava flow, presumably from a volcano. So, naturally, I followed the dark texture. I hiked up higher and higher for, honestly, most of the day. It was a lot of hiking. And I ate most of my lemons that I had just gotten. But as I got closer, I saw a peak. And judging by how the peak looked, I had a good idea of which volcano I had just found. Mauna Loa, meaning Long Mountain, is the largest active volcano in the world, with its last eruption occurring in November of 2022. But this is nothing compared to its 33 other eruptions since 1843. And get this, in the 30s and 40s, lava flow from the eruption was headed towards the Hawaiian city of Hilo, causing the US military to drop bombs in order to change the lava path. Britannica lists these efforts as partially successful. So, take that as you will, but there is no denying the sheer power and size of Mauna Loa. On day 9, I redirected my attention to my not-built ship, and decided that finding some wood was my current focus. This is when it decided to start raining again, but that didn't stop me from getting some logs, before having some mobs spawn nearby. So, I then got to the treetops and crafted some floaters, which will help the ship float. And with that, my new goal was to reach the shore and start working on this ship base of mine. However, I didn't even get to see the shore before sunset. And the next morning, I wasn't in a great position. I was out of water, and I now couldn't sprint. But after a bit of frustratingly slow travel, I spotted something odd in the distance. So, I approached it. And yeah, it was another volcano, but not just any volcano. If Mauna Loa is the world's largest active volcano, well, Kilauea is simply the world's most active volcano, as it has been almost constantly erupting since 1983. Kilauea is also the home of the Hawaiian goddess Pele, who is the goddess of volcanoes. And legend has it, she moved from the island of Kaua'i and settled down here in Kilauea, thus making it so active. Now, before I continue, I do have to give a massive thanks to 2 channels that helped me capture Hawaii as accurately as I could. Hello from Hawaii and Off Grid Hawaii are both channels that document what it's like living in Hawaii, just in very different ways. So, go do what this community does best and give their channels some love. They'll be linked in the description below. Now, due to my basic survival instincts, I did not approach Kilauea, but instead continued my quest to find the shore. As I made my way down the island, I had to use slabs in order to travel, as I had no sprint. However, I managed to not only make it to the shore, but also heal myself up. I then did a little bit of rowing, before deciding that tomorrow, I would be building my ship. So I started day 11 by doing just that, some shipbuilding. I also kept in mind that the storm would be arriving in 10 days, so I had to build something stable. I got a lot of wood and just kept building. I was definitely prioritizing style over function, as the design I had in mind looked cool, but maybe wasn't the most practical thing for me. But here it is anyways. I ended up getting about 2/3 of it done by the end of the day, and so the next morning, I picked right back up with getting more wood. Now, I think it's important for me to mention that because this is a survival-based video, I will not be visiting locations like Honolulu or Pearl Harbor. Not only would that defeat the purpose of survival, but I also want to focus on Hawaii itself. With that being said, I kept working well into the afternoon, which is when I finished the first iteration of my ship. Okay. Okay. Are we going? We're going. That's right. It looks... There's room for improvement. There is room for improvement. And while it might have looked subpar, it was also lacking in the speed category. So I took a look at the recipe for an engine, and saw that it needed iron. That just meant that I had my new objective. I woke on day 13 to try and find some iron. This is why I decided to go ahead and leave my ship behind, as it was genuinely that slow. As I sailed along the coast looking for a structure or place to mine, I suddenly realized that I had forgotten my bed. This gave me another excuse to burrow, which apparently I'm quite fond of in this video. But I started my mini mine, and that night I ended up finding a total of 13 iron, and then cooking it. Next morning I collected my iron and left, weary of this Enderman. I wanted one more night for mining, so I continued up along the coast. That's why I noticed this little river cutting into the island, and upon following it, I found myself at an icon of the Big Island. Akaka Falls is an incredible waterfall that cascades down 442 feet. That's about 134 meters for my metric viewers. This earns it the title of one of the tallest waterfalls in all of Hawaii. But that's not the only reason for its scenic fame, as this whole area around the falls was used to film parts of Jurassic Park. But that's not what I was focused on when I approached the falls. Instead, I decided to swim to the top. I'll just pick it up on my way down. I then got myself way up the river. And after spotting this Enderman, I started my rafting. Yeah, this was a bad idea. Oh, that almost went really poorly. That was almost really, really bad. As I rode around some more, I decided to head inland. And that night, I did some more mining, only to break both my pickaxes and not even find a single piece of iron. Next morning, I left my bunker, and I figured it would be better for me to go across the island rather than by shore, as I'd have a much better chance of finding iron that way, whether it be structure or the ore itself. I did lots of tree jumping, that is, until I spotted some mobs. I couldn't tell if it was a sheep or goat, but as I approached, I was happy to see that it was both. And upon shearing the sheep, I got the 3 wool that I needed to craft another bed. And so, I did just that. Only as the evening sun set in, I couldn't help but wonder where I was. I also noticed that I needed water. Like, very soon. This continued through day 16, as I now had no sprint. So, my new objective was simple. Get to the coast. I really need to start to carry water with me, but I also need iron for the engines, so you have to pick and choose. And that afternoon, I finally made it to the shore. And on day 17, before getting some water, I tried to figure out what direction my boat was in. After spotting some trees that I had already taken down, I knew that it had to be in, well, that direction. So I got some water and healed up, before cooking some of this mussel meat, and heading on my way. Eventually, after a bit of rowing, I found my boat. But there was no time to celebrate, as I wanted to get this engine crafted now. So I got some more materials that I would need, and then it started to rain. See, apparently Hawaii has very unpredictable weather. It might be sunny one minute, and then completely storming the next. And think about it, these islands are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with no other land really nearby. So it makes complete sense. Anyways, weather talk aside, I ended up crafting 2 engines. And yeah, my ship was a lot faster now. Next morning, I woke and knew that the storm was right around the corner. I also knew that there was one more thing on the Big Island that I really wanted to explore, and that was Mauna Kea. So my current plan was to find this legendary volcano before the storm arrived. I found this bit of dry land and decided to disembark here. I also gathered some more wood from my ship, as I now needed fuel, and charcoal would be the easiest fuel for me to make. However, as I advanced up the hillside, I spotted a rather ominous-looking kilauea. But I just decided to get some more wood nearby and keep moving. As I advanced up this mountainous terrain the next morning, I found what looked like an old lava path, and mined some of this black stone for my ship. I then continued up, and noticed that I was low on water, so I continued even further up, and then I noticed that I was now in a bit of a different, more sandy-ish area. I hadn't seen this terrain before, so I continued further along it, and as the land kept getting higher, I knew that I had found it. Not only is Mauna Kea the highest point in Hawaii, but from its subaquatic base to its often snow-capped peak, Mauna Kea is the tallest mountain on Earth, at over 30,000 feet, or 10,000 meters. But for my Everest fans out there, myself included, keep in mind that over half of Mauna Kea's height is underwater. So yes, measuring from sea level, Everest is still the tallest. But that doesn't stop this dormant volcano from being an incredibly sacred place to the native Hawaiian people. And this only became more obvious as I approached this sign. Aloha. Mauna Kea is historically, culturally, and environmentally significant. Please do not hike to the summit. But it wasn't like I'd be able to climb it anyways, as it was extremely cold. So much so that I had to run down the mountain to get to this campfire. But as the sun rose on Mauna Kea the next morning, I knew that the colorful tranquility would only last for so long, as my new objective was to get back to the ship before the storm arrived the next day. However, I had another issue. I needed water. So with my expert knowledge of Minecraft, I hatched a genius plan. I placed this snow block and put as much heat around it as I could. I then simply waited for it to melt. Any minute now. Just a little bit longer. Okay, yeah, I might have done a Google search to see if snowblocks actually melt, and no, they do not. I love wasting time. Yeah, I was in a pretty terrible position. I had no sprint, and a storm bringing who knows what would be arriving shortly. But as the evening sun set in, I found this small opening. As I approached it, I got this iron, and also got myself low after fighting some mobs. The storm had arrived, and I had no idea what this meant for me. See, as it turns out, I was not in a cave, but actually a lava tube. And whether it be from the storm or me just entering the lava tube, I was about to see some lava. I collected some iron here and spotted this chest. Only that's when I began to hear noises. Yeah, I had to run, only I couldn't. I immediately got to the ceiling and started digging. With every block I was worried that lava was going to be right behind it. But I eventually got to the surface, and decided that I needed to try for the shore. It was both incredibly stormy and windy as I traversed the dense forests. The clouds were also really dark, but I made it to the shore that evening, and healed up a bit before going to sleep. The next morning, it was still stormy, but I went in the direction that my boat was in, and eventually the storm cleared up, and I found my boat. The first storm wasn't too bad, but I just didn't know that there were worse storms to come later on. I smelted some iron and crafted this water bucket, before more rain started up. But now that I had a water bucket, I had a source of water with me wherever I went, Anyways, I decided to finish the day by doing some more boat work. On day 23, I want to go along the coast of the Big Island one last time before leaving it. I also needed to find a landmark of some sort, so I could figure out what direction to set sail in. So I continued along the shore in search of a landmark. Unfortunately, I didn't see any landmarks by nightfall. But I did see another amazing sunset. Next morning I passed what was most likely Akaka Falls. That's when my cat Valentino decided to throw up on the floor next to me. Okay, hold up, okay, alright. Give me a sec. Thank you for that lovely gift, Tino. After that fun moment, I found myself back where I'd spawned in. I also swiped up this boar. As I continued up the coast with my new boar, I eventually spotted the Waipi'o Valley. And that's when I decided to use Google Maps to see what direction to go in from here. I followed the maps to the tip of the island, which was right here at a familiar lighthouse. And on day 25, before leaving, I decided to make one more engine. So I went to shore to get some stone. And this seagull stole my cooked mussel. Don't you dare. Don't do it. Don't do it. Oh my gosh, what did it take? It took my mussel. I took this opportunity to sneak back into the lighthouse and break this spawner. There wasn't any undiscovered loot though, so I just went back to my engine building business. And that's when I almost jumped in the water with this shark. Ooh. And you know what? Let's go ahead and talk about Hawaii's maritime predator. Tiger sharks are not only considered to be aggressive predators, but they'll eat just about anything. And in Hawaii, that can include entire sea turtles. See, these guys can also grow up to be about 18 feet, or almost 6 meters. But it's their signature striped pattern on their sides that gives them their feline adjacent name, not their aggressive nature. Either way, tiger sharks are considered to be near threatened, due to both illegal population control and fishing. So even though they might seem scary, it's always best to be respectful around these sharks. And so that's why I decided to make an entire bridge over the water, to be respectful. I did end up getting materials for the engine, only I fell in the water in between transit. Safe, is it? Safe. It's not. I got the engine crafted by sunset though, and that meant that day 26 would be my heading off day. Last thing I wanted to do was get some food. And so, upon approaching this boar, I got attacked, but eventually killed it. Now, I could finally set off. Alright, goodbye, Big Island. I was out in the open ocean now. I felt indifferent to this, as I normally don't love the ocean, but I'm also on the coolest ship ever, so... But my ocean experience soon improved even more as I got to see another cool view that night. I also stayed up just to see what it was like at night. Next morning I did some more rowing. Well, until I spotted land. But I still had to make sure that this was the right island. So I rowed around it. And eventually came to the decision that yes, this was Maui. Maui is one of the main islands of Hawaii, and is one of the most diverse islands. From its dramatic mountains in the west, to a desert-like landscape in the east, to tropical picturesque beaches lining the island, and believe it or not, the world's largest dormant volcano. I docked my boat and organized my inventory, before noticing that I was overheating. So I collected some leaves and crafted some new armor. This idle travel continued into the next morning. But when I spotted a large and very climbable mountain, I did what I had to do. Only as I continued up, it got more and more mountainous. In fact, it was really dry and rocky where I was. And as it turns out, I had already stumbled upon that dormant volcano that I had just mentioned. Haleakala is a massive dormant volcano that has contributed to the desert landscape of the otherworldly valley around it. At its highest point, it reaches at over 10,000 feet, or over 3,000 meters. This has contributed to its name, as Haleakala translates to House of the Sun, and is known for its incredible sunrises and sunsets. As I climbed around the area and explored the terrain, I decided to summit the peak for sunset, and I wasn't disappointed. On day 29, I sacrificed some health for a faster descent, before using my water bucket for the first time. And as I continued, I spotted a structure. I made a new iron axe and got some wood from it, before seeing that it was yet another pillager structure. I just can't escape from these things, can I? But the loot soon made me reconsider my fortune, as it was the best I'd found yet. The pillagers got me really low though, and so I got to the side of the building, and I swear some of these guys have aimbot. Well, I guess technically they do, but never mind. I had to tower up the side of the building before then getting to sleep that night. And the next morning, I went in from the roof. I snuck up onto the top floor and saw hordes of mobs, and this zombie wearing weird armor. And so, with no other option, I headed back down to the first floor, where I witnessed a skeleton versus pillager fight. But this was only entertaining for so long, as I then had to kill the victor, and was shortly after swarmed. So, I had no choice but to run. I knew that I had to revisit the structure eventually, but for now, I needed food. On the morning of day 31, I did some boar hunting. Turns out I'm actually decent with a crossbow. And after killing 2 boars, I crafted a furnace and cooked the meat. I was then able to heal myself up and continue on my way. Only that's when I spotted this house. This house was nice, but the loot inside was even nicer, as it was the best that I had come across. There's lots of cool food in here, and also these digging claws, which essentially gave me haste. I also found this backpack that apparently removes negative effects, and these red torches. After exploring the rest of the house, I continued on my way up the beach, and saw another cool sunset. The next morning, I decided to head back to my ship, and bring it around to where I was now. While I rode over there, I couldn't help but notice the amazing scenery around me. But eventually I made it back to the ship. And before I moved it anywhere, I wanted to make some improvements. This is why I discovered just how good the digging claws were. Yeah, this was my new favorite item. I mean, look at the speed. Anyways, I just did ship work for the rest of the day. And that didn't change on day 33. I extended the legs under the ship, but when it started storming, I decided to move the ship closer to where I was. I then worked on the legs well into the night. But next morning, I pulled the ship all the way. My new objective was to now explore some more of Maui and find things for my ship. So I crafted a chest and headed out. I stopped back by the house so I could collect these shelves, only they didn't drop. So I pulled the ship further along the coast into a much more scenic area. Something interesting to me about Hawaii is how it's both ancient and new. The big island of Hawaii is only about 500,000 years old, whereas the mountains you're seeing here in the West Maui Forest Reserve, well, they're estimated to be up to 2 million years old. But my fascinating facts soon left my mind, as I spotted a rogue group of pillagers, and decided to just keep rowing. I went back to my ship and saw a nice view that night. Next morning, I continued with my exploring quest, and went alongside the shore. I even ended up sailing to the exact opposite side of Maui. And that's where I spotted this strange island. Molokini Crater is a popular destination for those visiting Maui, as not only is it a volcanic crater, but underneath the waves, is a hotspot for oceanic activity. This makes it the perfect site for both snorkeling and birdwatching, as it hosts a vibrant reef within its ring. I searched this small boat nearby and found some decent loot, like this tentacle food and this scuba gear, as well as this water purifier. Oh, and this water bomb, whatever that is. Anyways, I decided to test out the scuba gear with a quick dive. Only it just did not work. And to make matters worse, I was getting my food stolen again. Next day, I continued exploring Maui. I also wanted to find some terracotta, as I would need it for my ship. So I pulled the ship around to this rocky area, and made my way up it. But due to my lack of leaf armor, I had to place water every 5 seconds, or I'd just simply overheat. Either way, I made it close to the top by sunset. And on day 37, I went further up the mountain, with the same water bucket situation. Anyways, I found a spot to do some mining, and got a full stack. However, I wasn't quite done yet, as I had a structure to loot. Oh no, I did not forget about the structure. So, I hiked in that direction. Only to realize that I had hiked a little too far. I made it to the coast that night, which is definitely way too far. So I turned around the next morning and hiked back. Only I was out of food by this point. I went towards the structure anyways, and eventually gave in and crafted leaf armor. But back to the structure. I had finally reached it. And so I ran in and broke the spawner immediately. And then got some more purely great loot. Before heading up to the second floor. That's when I found these torch flower arrows, which I thought looked pretty cool. But that's also when this creeper made his way down this ladder. Anyways, I decided to try out the water bomb. And upon throwing it, it landed on the floor below. Look, I don't want to talk about it. I'm just gonna go to sleep. Next morning, I made it onto the roof, and then dug through the ceiling. This is when I decided to dig down to the chest itself, and try to get behind it. But this baby husk fell on me, and did some considerable damage. So, I just kept going. And that's when I reached the chest. It had some pretty cool loot. However, I now had to escape. I ran out of the building, and it was once again too hot. So, I crafted my leaf armor for the 100th time, and headed for shore. Boom. I did decide to craft a golden apple though, which helped me with my health a little. Anyways, that evening I found my boat and started on the second floor. Next day I brought the ship with me to West Maui. And yes, I know it might look funny right now, but I promise I have a plan for the ship. Anyways, as I sailed past the crater, I saw another island in the distance. That's when I remembered that there was actually another island nearby. Well, 2 to be specific. See, Maui used to be one giant island called Maui Nui. However, over time it split into 4 separate ones. And don't worry, we'll get to this top one eventually. But these 2 islands have their own interesting history. Kaho'olawe is the smallest of the Hawaiian main islands, and is completely uninhabited due to the United States using it as a target practice both during and after the Second World War. There is still a risk of undetonated charges. But it's truly a shame, as the native Hawaiian people used to use this island for farming and to teach navigation. Lanai, on the other hand, was bought by the Dole Company in 1922, and then made it into the biggest pineapple plantation in the entire world. Oh, and get this, pineapples aren't even native to Hawaii. No, the Dole Company brought them from South America and introduced them to the islands. So yeah, I know there's a lot of information there, but the history of these islands is just fascinating. If not a little tragic at times. Anyways, I continued my journey and spotted some sharks. And then got more terracotta. Finally, I made it to West Maui by sunset. Only I'd forgotten about something very important. The storm was strong, and so I decided to move my ship further up the coast. However, that's when I spotted this cyclone. I couldn't tell if it was moving closer to me or not, but I ditched my ship anyways, as it was way too slow. But as I was leaving, I realized that the cyclone might literally sweep up my ship, and I wasn't ready to give that ship up. So I went back and continued to move the boat away from the storm, and this is when I got the genius idea to try to swim under the cyclone. And naturally, that didn't work. Physics might have something to do with that, but either way, I soon found myself in a similar position to my Norway video. But as the storm shot me out, I landed in water, only to be swept up again. And upon landing, I blocked myself in this time. As soon as I got the chance, I ran for my boat, and it was super laggy, but I made it, and proceeded to row the boat away. Next morning, I did some more boat work. I could still see the storm, but it was further away. And by the time I collected a decent amount of wood, I could no longer see the storm. Anyways, I did tons of boat work this day. That carried well into the night. And that same night, when I decided to eat this tentacle, this happened. On day 43, I woke to a beautiful sight. Before getting some logs for fuel and stone for another engine, I was planning on leaving the next morning, but before I did so, I wanted to start in the kitchen. And that evening, I crafted my engine and got ready to set off. Next few days were just a lot of ocean travel. I once again used Google Maps to direct me. And I also did some boat work here and there, but it was mostly open ocean. I did decide to collect some sand for my next floor, only that's when I spotted a shadow. Yeah, these tiger sharks are going to be the death of me. Finally though, on day 48, I spotted land. I followed along this coast and saw that it was very dry and rocky. And then I spotted some blocks. There were pineapple crates and a lot of fruits here. So I collected them, but I also knew that this was not the next island, but instead it was Lanai, the island I mentioned earlier. So back to sailing. However, after a brief course adjustment, I found the island I was looking for the next day. Moloka'i is the 5th largest island in Hawaii, and also the one that retains the most traditional culture. See, a large percentage of the island's population is of native Hawaiian descent. And that's an important thing to note about Hawaii. It's a very diverse place with many ethnic backgrounds. But population aside, Moloka'i is also home to the world's highest sea cliffs. And it's the home of hula. As I sailed along the coast of Moloka'i, I found a spot to disembark at. I soon noticed that I was overheating again though, which confused me because I guess my leaf armor just keeps breaking. But anyways, I decided to hike through this dense forest for what felt like the entire day, before eventually crafting myself some leaf armor, yet again. My new goal was to explore the island and also find a material for the top floor of my ship. But as I made it to the other side of the island, this seagull stole my pineapple. Next morning, I woke to see that it was already day 50, and I like to use this day to say thanks for watching this far into the video. Also, the comment that guessed the location first was from It's Certainly Me, and yes, it was very much certainly you. Yeah, I know I'm very funny. But with that being said, before I continue, I wanted to remind you all of the fundraiser attached to this video, thanks to the Maui Strong Fund. And I want to give one more thanks to Hello from Hawaii and Off Grid Hawaii for their help. Go give them some love if you haven't already. Now, back to the video, where for the rest of day 50, I hiked through this forest, and saw some very dramatic terrain by that evening. The next morning, I found myself looking at more amazing views of the terrain, before seeing all of these animals by the shore. I found this little structure though, and inside this chest there were torchflower arrows, which I definitely wanted to try out. I continued along the shore, and that's when I spotted this house. But before entering, I found this wandering trader that was selling really cool stuff. Wow, that is cool. Inside the house, I took a couple of lanterns, and some of the other decorations. Also tried taking these pots, but I just ended up destroying them. I felt bad, so I just gave the remnants of the pots back to the villagers. You can have your brick back. So, problem solved. On day 52, I followed this river and found this baby boar. I then continued along the island and collected spruce whenever I could. However, when I got to the shore again, I spotted something pretty cool. At around the same time as the Viking era, the first Polynesians were arriving in Hawaii. Now the question comes to mind, how did they manage to travel over 2,000 miles from the South Pacific all the way to Hawaii? Well, they did that impossible voyage on these, the Wā This is the name for the Hawaiian double-hull canoe that they used to traverse the incredibly difficult and rough waters of the Pacific Ocean. The ancient Hawaiians were also incredibly skilled voyagers and navigators. As I approached the first ship, though, I had quite the jump scare. No, that was awful. That was awful. That was genuinely awful. Yet, upon reaching the shore, I developed a plan. Next morning, I got to work on my plan, which was literally just to build a giant bridge. And no, I cannot speed bridge. But I did successfully bridge over the sharks, fully knowing that if I fell in the water, I would likely die. Finally, upon reaching the first ship, I checked this chest, and saw that it had no loot. So I bridged over to the next one. And no loot. So I headed back to the beach, seeing that the sharks were fully aggressive now. And in light of my failed venture, I decided to just keep exploring the island. And the constantly amazing terrain made that pretty easy for me. Next morning I woke to what seemed like a foggy morning, but for now I wanted to get back to my ship. And so, after a bit of hiking, I made it back and got started on my next floor. While I did this, I remembered that the storm would be here in a few days. But that didn't really bother me, as I built this ship up pretty nicely. And day 55 was no different. I was dedicating some time to my soon-to-be very cool ship. On day 56, I wanted to craft some engines, so I got some fuel cooking, and got materials for the engines. Finally, on day 57, I decided that this would be the final boat day for a bit. But with that being said, I looked through the crafting recipes for my kitchen, and stumbled across an unexpected item. Why is he here? But I crafted some cabinets and bookshelves, and continued on my boat work. On the morning of day 58, I moved my newly upgraded ship along the shore to try to find a landmark for my bearings. But this thing was incredibly slow, presumably due to how big it is. So I went and got some more logs, before spotting this fishing hut. Now this was a modded structure that I recognized, and I remembered that it spawned these weird little fish zombies. So after dealing with them, I found that the loot was actually pretty helpful. This fishing rod had some great enchantments, and I got a ton of cod. Finally, on day 59, it was time for me to set off. I fueled the engines and found the tip of the island to set off from, and with that, I only knew that the next island was to the west. So I set off into the open ocean. Only it wasn't long before I came across a minefield full of sharks. That's at least 2 or 3 sharks. After moving past them, I sailed into the afternoon, and eventually spotted what looked like a sailboat that evening. And then this seagull stole from me again. What'd you steal? How did you steal? Next morning, I docked my ship near the sailboat, and I knew that I had to make this quick, as the storm would be arriving tomorrow. Inside the boat, there was some cool loot though. I found what looked like the rest of the scuba gear that I needed, and upon taking the loot, I figured it would be a good idea to also take all of the wool from the ship. So I did. I then went outside to test out this scuba gear. And while I was worried about a certain maritime predator, I actually didn't see any sharks. So I stole this anvil on my way out, and continued into the open ocean. And that night, I named my little stowaway. You know, that's a good name. I'll call you Gart. G-A-R-T. Gart. The winds were high and the rain was heavy, and I just kept steering my ship. I checked on Gart to make sure he was doing okay, and yeah, he was unfazed. I also tried to figure out how to replace this stupid ladder that I keep getting stuck on, but I couldn't find a good solution. With the storm right outside though, I just kept moving. I didn't see any cyclones this time, and yeah, I'll be honest, the storm this time around was pretty tame. I definitely should not get used to that though. Next morning I had a bit of a problem. The fuel had already run out, and so my ship was incredibly slow now. The storm had died out though, so I was just able to keep going in this direction. I did check out the water, only to see that I was now in a much deeper part of the ocean, before checking storage for fuel. And I found 3 charcoal. So I used what I could. And you know what? It must have worked, because shortly after, I found land. And this time, I knew pretty quickly that I'd found the right land. Oahu is known as the heart of Hawaii, perhaps because it hosts Honolulu, or perhaps because it holds almost 1 million people, compared to its neighbor Maui, that holds roughly 160,000 people. See, Honolulu is the capital of Hawaii, but it wasn't always that way. In the late 18th century, King Kamehameha I triumphed over the already inhabited island of Oahu thanks to his supply of colonial weapons. This eventually led to the capital being moved from Lahaina in Maui to Honolulu. I walked around this island as the sun set, and knew that there had to be some interesting things here. Next morning I found myself walking along this beach, until I spotted another baby boar. Hello. I then found my first structure for this island. Now, is this friendly or not? Not. With my third pillager structure of the video, I actually found that not all of them were entirely intimidating, as there seemed to be a musical pillager. Either way, I decided that I would simply deal with the structure later. I then proceeded to have even more food stolen. You took an... Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It's not funny. Before continuing along the shore. Yeah, I wasn't having a great time yet. Only that changed as I took a look at the scenery. And that night, I decided to try out these torch flower arrows. That's so cool. On day 64, I followed along the coast. Only I didn't quite realize that the beach I was currently on was a rather famous beach. Moloka'i Beach is not only known to be one of the best beaches in America, but has also ranked as one of the best beaches in the world. This is due to its unparalleled serenity and vibrant blue waters. Moloka'i itself means heavenly sea, and I think that's pretty accurate. I found these beach supplies that carried some cool loot, and then I ventured over to this hammock, which I tried to break. I made that same mistake in the Amazon, didn't I? But as I traveled along the shore, I knew that I had to come back that afternoon. Anyways, I decided to do a quick trip over to the Honolulu side. Even though I'm not supposed to, but hey, I make the rules here, and I just wanted to take a look. I spotted the Diamond Head crater, and saw the amazing mountains behind it. And then I figured that I should go ahead and turn around. Yeah, see, it really was just a quick look. Anyways, I made it back to the beach that afternoon. Next morning, I took some of this beach decor, and had a genius idea for my ship. But we'll get to that later. I also decided that it was time to loot the Pillager Tower. So I crafted a new shield and did just that. However, upon entering on the second floor, I was met with, not pillagers, but an incredible amount of onions. You guys have a problem. This many onions is wild. And after taking the rest of this loot, I camped on the roof that night. Okay. Next day I healed up, and saw that there were considerably more pillagers now. So I figured that drowning them would be the best option, but I needed more water for that. So I headed to the beach where I got shot by this pillager with piercing on his crossbow. Yet when I returned with more water, I wanted to see if that pillager could try to shoot me while he was submerged in buckets of water. Anyways, the water's working, only I was now being attacked from the outside, and knew that I had to make a run for it. I'm not dreaming. I got back to my ship that afternoon, and while I reassessed my kitchen, I spotted something in the distance. Is that something over there? Next morning, I approached these mystery structures, and saw that it was actually a village. It was a pretty cool village, although it didn't have much loot. I did end up taking this enchanting table though, as well as some spruce trapdoors. I applied these findings to my ship, and then saw that Gart had escaped. So I carefully swiped him back in. On day 68, I moved my way up the coast, and saw that Gart had once again left. My ship was also ridiculously slow, as I was just now passing the village. So I made a little enclosure for Gart to keep him in, and then finished the kitchen. And this thing looked cool. But I continued the day with more travel. And the next morning, I woke to some rain. I kept along the coast though, as eventually the rain began to clear. But this also gave me the opportunity to go further inland on the island. So my new objective was to explore the island and find more food. But that's when I came across this little guy. The nene, also known as the Hawaiian goose, is a bird found only on the main islands of Hawaii, and is the only living species of goose native to the islands. This led to the nene being declared as Hawaii's state bird in the year 1957. But on top of that, it is also an endangered species, as the nene is the world's rarest goose. Now, I do have to point out that this mob was made by my friend Steve Locks. He is an incredibly talented entity creator for Minecraft, and you can go and download this mob for yourself. His Planet Minecraft will be linked in the description below. After meeting a local legend, I suddenly remembered that I didn't actually need to find food, as I was wearing a backpack that had food in it. No, I don't want to talk about it. Anyways, that night I cooked some fish. And on day 70, I collected my fish and just kept exploring. And as I traversed this terrain, I spotted what looked like a ship in the distance. And yeah, these seagulls just kept stealing from me. And no, it is not funny. I've had so much food stolen from me this episode, I can't even. It is not funny. Just look at that. That's cool. It just is. On day 71, I followed these rivers nearby. You're my favorite. You know that. I kept exploring Oahu, but I knew that I would probably want to return to my ship in a day or so. But next morning, after collecting some azalea flowers, I found a rather well-known spot. Mauna Falls is a beautiful waterfall cascading down the mountains of Oahu that goes right into this pool of water. This makes it a popular spot to visit, especially in the summer. Given the tough hike that it takes to get here, I suppose you'll feel like you've earned the falls if you ever visit. I myself did some swimming, before collecting some bamboo and leaving to head back to my ship. I wanted to climb this mountain on my way out though, and upon doing so, I got a pretty cool view that night. Next morning, my priority was getting back to my ship, and so I went by river, which led me back to the ominous ship. And I just followed the coast. And naturally, as soon as I found and entered my boat, this happened. No, you have to be joking at this point. Seagulls aside, I made this planter that afternoon. And on day 74, I decided that I was going to finish this ship before I left for the next island. And so, that's just what I did. Cue the music, because we're building this ship. I stopped back by the Pillager base for some mangrove wood, and then started on my top deck. Next day, I finished the top deck, and started on the sails I want to add. After finishing one, I think Gart got crushed somehow. So let's just take a quick moment of silence. We'll stop the music. Okay, now full speed ahead. As I worked, I thought about finding a replacement for Gart. And on day 76, I ended up getting 4 seagulls stuck in my ship, as I looked for a new Gart. I finally found a new boar, but then this happened. I did manage to sneak him in the boat though. Yeah, this was kind of a wasted day. But the next morning I rowed this boat to my ship, and got Gart the second in, before finishing the other sail. And now I just had one last thing to do before setting sail, and that was getting some more food. So I cooked some food and ended up moving my helm to the top deck. And yeah, it was finally time. On day 78, I waited for my fuel to cook, before filling all of my engines and setting off towards the tip of the island. I had just one more island to go, but this was also the furthest island away. Regardless, as I sailed towards the end of Oahu, I had almost forgotten about the ominous ship lurking nearby. So I did a quick stop at this ship. I boarded it using my gliding umbrella, and then found loads of TNT. Given that this is a familiar situation for me, I knew what to do. But before doing so, I slept on the sail that night. And next morning, I unleashed the TNT. I also stole some wool off the ship, before looking at the underwhelming amount of damage that I had done. But this is when I realized that I was literally wasting fuel, and so I knew that I would probably just have to leave this ship behind. After all, I have to get to this last island, so I hopped back on my ship, and finally set off. And as I did, 2 of my engines went out. On day 80, I kept steering straight ahead, knowing fully that a storm was on its way. I was crossing into the deep ocean, which made me feel great. But that evening, I crafted 2 large lamps, and braced myself for the storm to come. The final storm was here, and almost immediately, I spotted a cyclone. As I steered away from it though, I had a moment of panic, when I realized I was actually steering into another cyclone. I used my umbrella to get down onto the deck, before healing myself up. And it was really laggy here. Eventually I managed to weave between the 2 cyclones, before spotting a third, and this one almost looked bigger. But as my screen became covered in clouds, I ended up sailing through the cyclone. And yeah, it seems like no storm can alter the course of my voyage. I'm just that cool. That good at the game. But on day 82, I kept moving, without fuel. And the storms are still going on, they were just distant. Oh, and my new Gart had already vanished. Probably a casualty of the storm. And that just shows, no matter what companion I find in these videos, they quite literally could die at any moment. And so could I reminded myself as I threw snowballs at this shark. I then decided to try and get these blinds up, only that was a mistake. Yeah, no more boat work for now, I'm just gonna keep moving. And this went through day 83. Only around midday, my Pacific voyage was complete. Kaua'i, the last of the main islands. Kaua'i is sometimes called the Garden Island, due to its abundance of greenery. But Kaua'i is also known to be one of the wettest places on Earth, with Mount Waialeale often being covered in clouds. But Kaua'i isn't all greenery and rain, as it has some drier places as well. We'll get to that later. All you need to know is that this island is an amazing Pacific anomaly. I kept along the shore until I found a spot to disembark at. But I didn't make it far before I had to head to sleep. Next morning, I found myself hiking through this forest, before realizing that I didn't have any food. So I continued hiking with a new objective in mind: get to the coast. That way I could use my nice fishing rod to get some fish. But I was now in a pretty cool mountainous part of the island. And on day 85, I found this chicken, and promptly killed it. Now, Kaua'i is actually known for its large population of chickens, and that's once again due to the colonization of the island, as a lot of these animals are not native. But I started my fishing while my chicken cooked. And I ended up catching a decent amount of fish. And that evening, I found a river to follow. Next morning, upon following the river, I found myself in one of Kaua'i's most famous natural wonders. Waimea Canyon is simply known as the Grand Canyon of the Pacific, and it's not hard to see how it got that name. This incredible canyon is about 14 miles long, or 22 kilometers, and just like with all these wonders, Minecraft can only capture so much. I paddled my way around the canyon and climbed to a better vantage point, before deciding to explore the rest of the island. So I set off to keep exploring, and made it to the shore that evening. Next day I figured that heading back to the ship to then sail around the entirety of the island would probably be my best bet at finding any other structures or wonders. So I collected some wood for fuel, and then headed to my ship, with a new stowaway, Gart III. Yeah, that didn't quite work out. You're kidding. The next morning I set off to explore Kaua'i by shore, and that's when I spotted this lighthouse. However, this wasn't just another pillager lighthouse this time, but rather a real and historic one. Kilauea Point sits on the northwest part of Kaua'i, and hosts one of the largest seabird populations in all of Hawaii. This is not only a great place to birdwatch, but it's also a great place to find some history, as this lighthouse was built in 1913 and was essential in the first trans-Pacific flight to Hawaii. Come back. Okay. I entered the lighthouse and walked up these stairs, and while there wasn't any loot, it didn't really matter anyways. You know what's cool about this? Directly north from here, if you just keep going for a very long time, you'll hit Alaska. That is really cool. I decided to keep sailing around the island, and on day 89, I got ready for one last trip. For those of you unfamiliar with the channel, I normally do one final big trip in the last 10 days as a send-off, and I also normally do this trip with my companion. So that was my objective for the day: find a companion. I tried getting this Nene in, and that didn't work, but I finally was able to get another boar inside. And so yeah, Gart IV, I guess you're my companion. And I better not see any Gart IV hate in the comments, okay? Now with that being said, I finished out the day by getting some fuel. The next morning I filled my engines with said fuel and set off. I had some open ocean ahead of me, as I was going to sail all the way back to the Big Island. So yeah, this will take a while. Next few days consisted of lots of ocean travel, but while I move along the islands, I might as well rate Hawaii's difficulty. Hawaii is a place that challenged me in ways that I wasn't expecting, whether it be sharks, volcanoes, the heat, or the boars. But with that being said, I will have to give Hawaii a modest 6 out of 10 in terms of difficulty, as I had quite a nice time building my ship. Regardless, I reached the Big Island on day 96. I wanted to take Gart IV with me, but I didn't have a lead. So, remembering that slime spawned here, I did some slime hunting the next morning. I then took some string from my sails, and crafted a lead, only to find out that boars don't attach to leads, so I boated him instead. However, this all became unnecessary as I finally dropped him off the next day. Alright, Gart IV, this is where I'm gonna leave you. This place is cool. You'll like it here. Okay. That's not what I meant to do. Just don't... With Garth IV now sent off, I could row back to my ship and give it a proper send-off too. So, finally on day 99, I docked the boat in a scenic spot, and then looked around for any last-minute improvements to make. But you know what? Let's have a quick base appreciation moment, because this thing was cool. I've never been prouder of a kitchen in my entire life. Like, look at this thing. It is so cool. I then woke up on day 100 and did some swimming, while I thought about just how great the last 100 days have been. See, Hawaii might be one of the 50 states, but it has earned an independent nationality in the form of its otherworldly landscapes, its history, and its people, and I can only hope that I did it justice, as there really is nowhere on Earth quite like Hawaii. I'm afraid it is about that time. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.